Hello and welcome to this video on supply. In this video, we're going to look at what is meant by the term supply. We're going to do a little bit on the supply curve, movements along and shifts in the supply curve, and then lastly look at some factors that influence the level of supply. So let's imagine a scenario to start off with. You are a farmer, and on your farm you grow two things. You grow peanuts or you can grow rice. At the moment, the price of peanuts is 40 cents and the price of rice is 30 cents. And you have half your farm growing peanuts and half your farm growing rice. Now, if the price of peanuts was to rise to 50 cents and the price of rice was to fall to 25 cents, how might you react in terms of how you run your farm? Well, the logical thing to do would be to increase your production of peanuts to maybe 80% of your farm and reduce your production of rice to maybe 20% of your farm, because peanuts now have become potentially more profitable. And this is a good indicator of what supply is all about. Supply is the quantity of a good or service that a producer is willing and able to provide onto the market at a given price in a given time period. Producers are those people that create and supply goods and services to a market. And the basic law of supply, as we just illustrated, is that as the price of a product rises, so businesses expand supply to the market. So they try and supply more, and obviously vice versa if the price falls. So what's the supply curve? Well, the supply curve is a graphical representation of the relationship between price of a product and the quantity supplied. So we show it with the axes, price on the Y and quantity on the X. And it looks like this. And there is a positive relationship here between price and quantity. As we said before, as the price goes up, we would try and increase our level of supply. So an increase in price here from P1 to P2 would lead to an increase in the quantity supplied from Q1 to Q2. A decrease in price would lead to a decrease in supply. A good way to remember the direction of the supply curve is supply to the sky. So the supply curve shows us what would happen to the quantity supplied as price changes. So as the price goes up, producers would be looking to supply more to the market. Why is this the case? Well, an expansion of supply here would result in them responding to the profit motive. There's an opportunity to make more profit at a higher price. Therefore, I'm going to put more of my resources as a producer into producing that particular product. So changes in price will result in movements along the supply curve. An increase in price will expand along the supply curve. A decrease in price will see a contraction along the supply curve. But what might cause a shift in the supply curve? Well, there are a number of factors we need to be aware of: the cost of production, external shocks, technology, and taxation and subsidies. Let's start off with the cost of production. Lower unit costs mean that a business can supply more at each price. So perhaps costs have gone down because the business is more productive. Higher unit costs would increase the cost of supply and would shift the supply curve to the left. So for example, if you think of a bread manufacturer, one of the costs for them would be wheat. And here, as wheat prices are rising, it's raising their costs, and this would cause their supply curve to be shifting to the left. However, where the cost of wheat is falling, making it cheaper to supply wheat, this would cause the supply curve to shift to the right. Productivity is another factor that can influence the supply curve. By productivity, we mean the output per worker. And in this chart, we've got some examples here of the level of output per worker across different countries. So where productivity is high, we would expect, or a change in productivity, if productivity was to increase, we would expect this to lower unit cost to businesses and supply curve would shift to the right. Another factor might be external shocks happening in the economy. So for example, in 2009, Adidas responded to the recession by cutting output. Technological change also might have an impact. The increase in 3D printers, for example, may make there more business opportunities and lead to a significant increase in supply potential for many firms. It could also lower their costs, and this would cause the supply curve to shift to the right, an increase in supply. Indirect taxes can also affect the cost of supply, and that's what we're going to look at now. A tax is a charge made by the government on a goods, services, income, or capital. And they do this to raise funds for government spending programs or to change consumers' behavior. A type of tax is known as indirect tax. It's one type of tax that we're going to look at here. And these are taxes that are normally applied when you buy a good or service. And there are two main types, specific and ad valorem. A specific tax is one that's charged as a fixed amount per unit of a good. So for example, a tax on a pack of cigarettes might be 30 cents, which means you add 30 cents onto the price of a pack of cigarettes. Whereas an ad valorem is charged as a percentage. So when you sell something to a customer in a restaurant, whatever it's come to, maybe $10 or euros, you have to add on 20%. So the final price will be $12 or euros. What impact does this have on the supply curve? Well, the impact of a specific will increase the costs to the business that's making the product by the amount. So the amount of the tax that's being applied to the units, for example, 20 cents on a pack of cigarettes. However, if we think about an ad valorem tax, a percentage, actually that will have this effect, because what we're doing here is we're adding on a certain percent each time. So for example here, the price might be 1 and we're adding on 50%, so it's 150. Over here, the price might be 10, but we're adding on 50%, which takes us to 15. So the tax up here is 5 and the tax down here is 50 cents, because what we're doing each time is adding on a percentage increase. Another thing that will impact on the supply curve is subsidies. A subsidy is a form of government support offered to producers and occasionally consumers. These would be some examples of subsidies. So subsidies paid by a government to a supplier, and the effect is that it reduces the costs for the supplier or the producer, encouraging them to increase output. And so this will shift supply to the right. The total amount spent by the government is equal to the subsidy per unit multiplied by all the units that are being produced. So this diagram illustrates here what would happen if we introduce a subsidy, or the government introduces a subsidy. Supply would shift to the right, and there'd be an increase in supply as a result of the subsidy. So here's a nice little summary about shifts in supply. Factors causing the supply to shift to the right, an increase on the left-hand side, and factors causing supplies to shift to the left, decrease in supply on the right-hand side. It might be worth taking a screenshot of this and printing it out and sticking it in your notes. So in this video, we've looked at what is meant by supply, distinguished between movements along and shifts in the supply curve, and looked at some of the factors that will influence supply and cause shifts in the supply curve. That's it. Thanks for listening.